Good morning, everyone. Did you attend the keynote this morning? Yeah. So I didn't attend it, but I'm told that it was amazing. So now I have a very easy job of following up such a fantastic keynote, right? So let's start. The topic, as you see, is the focus as the backbone, making multi-cloud FinOps reporting boring. So yeah, just a short intro. My name is Rohit Mishra. I'm coming from India. This is my first time at X, so I'm very excited. I have 17 years of IT experience. I have built FinOps function in multiple orgs. In the past, I have been associated with Barclays, with Amdocs, and since 2022, I am leading the FinOps division at Avaloq. Who is Avaloq? Avaloq is a Swiss company. It is in the fintech space. We have around 140 plus customers, mostly banks, and we own the full suite of wealth management applications. So yeah, let's start to this topic. So whenever I have to start something, the first question which I always ask is, what is the problem we are trying to solve? So for us in Avaloq, based on the different customers we have, based on the different offerings we have, it made sense to completely move to a truly multi-cloud setup. And I have not met an architect in my life who is not madly in love with multi-cloud. And I completely understand that. There is a resilience factor, there is a no vendor lock-in, you get the best of breed services, so it all makes complete sense. And so same thing happened in Avaloq. The architects loved it, the management saw the value of it, and finance team also signed off on it, so we went to the multi-cloud. And then we tried to do the chargeback, and trust me, it's terrible. You ask the same question. You ask the one question, and you get different answers across different clouds. And this happens because the basic vocab was not the same. You have different semantics. So like something as basic as, what do you mean by a SKU use? What do you mean by a charge description? If you see the curve files of AWS, Azure, OCI, each one answers it in their own way, and it is not the same. So what used to happen is that if you have to change something, that entire process, the speed goes down. And especially when you are doing it on a scale. So like we have more than 500 accounts. So if you have to change something at one place, yeah, then it becomes a very complex exercise. There are different KPIs. They are not the same. So this is one of the big issues which we were facing from a FinOps point of view when we were trying to do the showback and the chargeback on a multi-cloud. So the word which I want to introduce here is boring. And I mean that as the highest possible compliment in engineering. So when we say boring reporting, it doesn't sound very exciting. But that's the point. When we are trying to standardize the cost data using the focus, what we aim to do is basically eliminate the variability or the noise which we see across different clouds. So for us, boring means standardized. Boring means consistent. And what we're trying to say is that the boring reporting is not a disadvantage. It is a foundation which then makes everything else fast, clean, and scalable. And also, when we're talking about the boring reporting, it means different things to different personas. So say suppose if you are talking from a FinOps point of view, the one thing which really matters to us is that when we're doing the chargeback, any number or any number which we are putting on the dashboard, which we are putting on our report, it should be completely 100% accurate. If you are doing it on a different days, if you are doing for different clients, it should always be it should be completely 100% trustworthy. And based on the pipelines which we have built, every single day, every single time when it works, the numbers, the reports, they are fully 100% accurate. So for us, that means a boring pipeline. It also ties down very well to something which is then being done by the engineering team or the architects. So because they take our input, and then now we are not arguing about the data points. We are arguing about the actions. How do we move ahead fast with the optimizing steps? Because the stage one, where, okay, is the data points accurate? Is the cost per unit API, all these things, are they valid? Because of our pipeline, it is boring, it works every time. That initial part is completely sorted now. And we also talk about the feedback loops. So because we have the architect teams in Avaloq, they take our input, and they also, in terms of the cost data, and they also use it to update their sizing models. So because now this pipeline, it works for every bank, for every resource, the time which they need to update their sizing models, and how then it is used for building up the business cases and other estimates, it all works very fine. So from an architecture and engineering point of view, having a boring reporting, it makes complete sense. Yeah, and also for a finance team, for them, the basic thing which matters a lot is the audit work. They have their P&L reconciliations. They build those MTPs. They build those annual budget estimates. And so all this downstream reporting which is happening, they take the source from our reports, our data points. So for them, boring means, okay, something which can be audited every time, something which is 100% accurate. Yeah, and finally to the management, when everything is in sync, when all the teams are saying there are no fights which are happening, there are no escalations which are happening, they are the happiest, right? And all that, every spoke in the wheel, it works fine, and then it leads to the faster decisions. So when we establish this pipeline, because it works every time, because it is boring, it gave immediate benefits to every stakeholder that we manage. So yeah, so now let's deep dive into the actual pipeline which we built. So we call it like the focus backbone, and it is the functional core on which then everything else hangs off. So for Avaloq, our 80% of the workloads are on OCI, on Oracle Cloud. And it is because our core application is Oracle based. So it made sense for us to move very heavily into OCI. And then we have 10% workloads on AWS and 10% on Azure. So we use OCI as our landing zone. And what I mean by that is the initial, the focus exports, the source files, we pull it, and we pull it in the OCI in a bucket in the object storage. Now, I want to make it very clear that the OCI is not owning the billing files. So the billing files, the source files, they still stay in their source, which is in AWS, Azure, and so on. And we don't change that. So we don't modify those files. We don't, they stay as it is. They also act as in terms of like a immutable audit files. So in case if you need to change anything, if you want to come back to them, we can always go back to the source and they will stay as it is. But in terms of the landing zone, in terms of the modification which is happening, we do everything on the OCI. And on the OCI, then we have specific folders. As you can see, there is a folder named raw, and then inside it, there would be one folder for each cloud, raw AWS, raw Azure, raw OCI, and then inside it, again, there will be a date, and then inside the date, we extract the source files from each one of them. We have seen that for OCI, for a single day, there would be multiple such files. But for Azure, there would be the one file for each day. But yeah, it is partitioned by the date. So all the files for a particular date will come and they will be saved in this space. Then we have a virtual machine on the OCI where the actual modification will take place. And what I mean by modification is that the column names inside the focus, they will be renamed to something which makes like a business meaning inside Avaloq. We will also add some of the CMD mappings which we have. We will also normalize the tags part, because in the focus file, the tags which we get, we are getting it in the JSON format. So we extract each of the tag and we add it as like one single column. So all these modifications, they will happen inside the OCI VM. We also standardize some of the cost units, because we have some regions where we are getting the cost in Swiss francs, in some it is SGD, some it is in USD, and because we have truly multi-cloud banks, like we have one customer which will have one application in one cloud, it is very important that in the final view, we are seeing a single cost unit. So all these modifications is happening inside the OCI VM. So the output of this entire process, we get the Parquet files. Then those files we send to the AWS S3 object storage, and we call it as the staging zone. And again, in this staging zone, we have a folder. Again, it is partitioned based on the cloud. It is partitioned then based on the date. So you have AWS / there will be a date, and inside it there will be a single file. And when we are doing this processing on the VM, what is happening is that in the focus files, you have the data per hour. You have one row where you have the charge hour. But we are aggregating it everything into a single day, because all our reporting, it is either based on the daily data or the monthly. So in the end, we get one Parquet file, which is the output, one file for each day. For us, the warehouse is the Redshift. So all the final Parquet files which were at the staging zone, we then enter it into the Redshift. There we have a single table. So now we don't have a separate table for AWS, a separate table for OCI. We have one final single table, which has the daily aggregated rows. But we don't use this table as a simple source for all our reporting, because then the querying would become very heavy. So out of this single table, we build the different business data marts. And what do we mean by that is that we will have, so in the old world, we used to have this SQL views, right? So each data mart is like a view which has something like, okay, daily cost per client, daily cost per service. We have some charges only for the compute. We have some data marts which are only for a particular cost center. So these kind of data marts we build on the top of this focus final table, which are then used to query, and all the reporting which is built, it is by querying these individual data marts. And then finally, we have the BI tools internally. We have the Superset, we have the Power BI. They will connect to these data marts. And finally, we have our different dashboards which represent different KPIs. So if you see this pipeline, by choice, we have kept it very linear and transparent. And we call it like the same film. There are very few plot twists. There is the same ending every time. And so if something goes wrong, we know exactly where to go, what to look, and how to solve it. So yeah, I will just try to show some of the screenshots here, because we're in the banking domain, we cannot give you a full demo. So we have divided this entire process into the 5 parts. There is the landing, which is happening on the OCI. There is transformation, again, OCI VM. Staging, which then happens on the AWS S3. There is a warehousing part, which is our Redshift, and then finally the reporting part. So as you see in the first step, this is the actual our central bucket. It is in the OCI. There you see we have the folder, we have the object FinOps focus central, under which you have folder named raw, under which then you have different folders for each cloud, AWS, Azure, OCI. Inside it, there would be these are the source Parquet files which we get. And then as the output of it, when the processing will take place, again, we do the same thing. We have, again, the partitioning by the cloud and by the date, and then these final files, they are sent to the staging part. So yeah, this is the VM where the actual transformation is taking place. It is all based on the Python automation where the files are pulled. It happens on a daily basis. We change the column names. Even in the focus, even though the column names are same, you still get certain things like in OCI, it would be like invoice issuer, while in AWS, it will be invoice issuer name. So all these kind of normalization, the tagging part, the cost unit part, all that logic comes here. And in the end, you get a final Parquet files. The size is very low because we have aggregated everything. There is one value per day for a specific type of dimension and SKU. And then finally, this is the screenshot from the AWS staging part. Again, same thing. Yeah, you have the partitioning, you have the date, and inside date, as I said, there will be the single Parquet file for each date. For the warehousing part, this is an example of the Redshift. I just want you to focus on the bottom part where you see a different column name for the tags. So this is something which is not there in the focus in this particular format. And while we are doing the processing part, we extract the tags and we build like one column each for each of the tags, the billing tags which we need. And this is what helps us to accurately get the cost for each of the customers, applications, cost centers. It is all based on the tags. Yeah, for the reporting part, I just want to give you an example. So yeah, of course, the data is all anonymized, and when you see such nice numbers, of course, it is all fake, So, but this is an example of this is the kind of reporting which was not possible before the focus, or if it was possible, it used to take lots of complex codes to do it. So here we are giving, these are the internal teams, there are different clients, there's engineering, there's academy team, and now we actually know how much amount each one of them is spending on different clouds. Instead of going to different source, we are able to get them all at a single place, and everything is in Swiss francs. And this is just one example of it. You also have, so now this is one of our customers, which actually has different applications on OCI as well as AWS, and we are able to get the data in a single place where we know, okay, per month for different environments, the ACC is your acceptance environments for prod, dev, for compute. So the benefit of it is that we are able to do the actual chargeback now. Even though we have different sources, we are able to see the data points at a single place and accurately do the chargeback. Okay. So one question which I always get is, why did we use the Redshift? If we have our landing zone on the OCI, if 80% of our workloads are on the OCI, then why do we need to do the processing and send the files back to Redshift? So I would say the very easy answer to it is, when we're starting with this entire cost visibility program, the idea was to standardize the cost part, and we didn't want to re-platform the entire analytics part. And what in Avaloq, Redshift was already being used. So what we do is not just the cost part, we also then link the cost part with the business volumes. And all the business volumes data, the APIs, the transactions, which are then captured by different monitoring platforms, it was already being stored in the Redshift. So it made sense for us to not change that and extend the program by months. Because it was something which was already being used, it was battle tested inside Avaloq, it was fast, so we decided to go on the same route. And We did had like very passionate arguments about it, and they were good arguments on both the sides, but in the end we decided that yes, we want to use the OCI for the pipeline operations, but we want to stay with the Redshift as the reporting truth. Yeah. So now just very quickly some numbers. What is the impact which we had, the benefit which we saw? So because earlier we used to go to different clouds and we used to extract the data points and then do some sort of manual reconciliation. The amount of coding which we had, the number of lines in the code, all those things went down. In terms of the report cycles, that were cut. The amount of the KPI, because it is not just one FinOps team, it is also the different downstream applications which use the cost data to also build their own reports. So all those KPIs, the timing, it came down. Also the amount of time it took an analyst like us, to get the data from different source, do that reconciliation work. Yeah, of course, everything, it became much more faster. The numbers are very compelling, and that's why we put them on the big font. But I also see there is also a very good advantage, which is something which is not tangible. And this is what we call, now the cross-cloud comparisons in different cost units and with different audit work, they all became more defensible. And so the time which we saved from doing this reconciliation work, that time was now spent in more decision-making meetings, in doing the actual optimization work. I know this line that now we are arguing more about the action points and not on the data points, that became like a North Star for our entire program. So, so far I've shown you the architecture and the pipeline flow end to end, But the real success, it doesn't come just from the diagrams, it came because we enforced what we call certain non-negotiables. So now I would like to show you that what we feel are the two core controls that make sure that if in case something goes wrong, the entire thing doesn't collapse into chaos, right? And those two things, I would say, are the partitioning, discipline, and the quality of the tags. So when we were doing this, we actually underestimated it. But now when I feel that these are the two things which make sure that that they matter more than anything else in the entire pipeline. And we will go through them one by one. So we say that folder structure is the contract, So like, what I mean by that, if focus is the vocab, if focus is the language, then the partitioning which is happening, that is like the functional core that makes the entire thing more auditable, it makes it more repeatable. So we enforce a very strict folder structure across every stage of the pipeline. So when we are talking about the landing zone, of course, there has to be one folder, the parent folder is the raw, then under it there has to be one folder for the cloud, there has to be one folder for the date. Same thing when we move to the staging part, you have to have a folder for the cloud, date, everything. So this consistency which we are seeing, it's not just aesthetic, it is functional. Because when we say folder structure is the contract, it is also our operational API. And what do I mean by that is, in case, suppose sometimes we see that the focus files comes late. There might be some things like the cloud has added some discounts, and that will come after 5 days. So now if we want to add those files, we know exactly where to go and add them. Suppose we want to audit something which is like 2 months old. We know, okay, in which place we can find it. Sometimes we do have cases where there is a schema change, and we might have to rerun entire 1 month of data points. So because of this partitioning, it becomes very easy. It has become like a repeatable operation, which then makes it more auditable and something which is very easy to go back and check and redo it again. Yeah, and one more thing is this partitioning. The output of it is also one data set. So it is the entire downstream applications, the entire reporting, the KPIs by the external teams as well, it is all based on that. And because of this partitioning, because of this folders which format which we maintain, we come back to it. It has made the entire pipeline very boring in the best possible sense. And the second part, as I said, it is the quality of the tags. So this is a topic which looks very simple, but whenever we are talking about any type of cost allocation, it tends to always become one of the biggest operational issue which most of the FinOps team face. And it was also the same with us. So before we did this, just giving an example, if you have a cost center, there will be some teams who would use it like cost underscore center, some will go with a capital C, some will go with a cost hyphen center, and every variation which we see here, it is technically valid. But when we're talking about from a cost allocation logic point of view, it becomes a dead end. And it's also like if you have a cost dashboard, and on the dashboard, if you say 20% of the cost is unallocated, contact the FinOps team for more information. Whenever any business manager sees that, trust me, the entire trust on the FinOps team is killed. So this is one of the issues which we try to solve, and our aim was that not a single cost should be unallocated. The chargeback should not be a rounding exercise. We didn't want to undermine the entire cost visibility program because we didn't have the correct and the accurate names. So what we did as a FinOps team, we overtook the governance of the tax part. And we said, okay, from a governance point of view, we are the single central team in the entire org, which will define the tag keys, the tag values. And how did we do it? We went and we said, okay, these are the minimum 10 tags from a billing point of view, which every resource should have. And to implement it, we made it part of the PRs. So in Avaloq, we have disabled the console access. Of course, we do have a read-only access, but if you want to deploy anything, whether it is a VM, your block volumes, everything has to be done via the GitHub TF pipeline. And we made the tags governance a part of it. So if there is any resource which doesn't have these tags which are defined by us, the PR will fail. So it's not something which we didn't go and did it from the scratch. The governance part in the PR from a tag point of view was present from before, but it was not for the billing tax. It was mostly for the IM tax. So we used the already existing pipeline and we inserted the billing tax into it. So now if you see for the same thing, which we also saw in the Redshift table, you have tags for the cost account, which is mostly like your SAP or the WBS code. You have the single tag key for the bank name. You have the single tag key for the application, the different team names, the owners, and these are some things which are defined by us. So this is not something which you do afterwards. You have to do it at the start. Otherwise, the entire allocation program, it is not very trustworthy. So yeah, if you have these two things, so if you have the partitioning discipline and if you have the quality of the tags, it makes everything more explainable, auditable, consistent. So yeah, before we leave this room, I just want to focus on 2 points more. So suppose if you want to implement this same thing in your org, like I'm not going to give you step-by-step information, but yeah, these are the few key things which you should always keep in mind. First thing, yeah, the incremental adoption will always beat the big bang thing. So don't try to do everything at once, So always start with, or what we say, the most debated definitions in your org. And this is something which is not going to be the same everywhere. So like, okay, how do you want to allocate the shared cost? What do you want to do with the commitment cost or the savings plan which you have? So once you have finalized this, and the focus file does give you an initial answer to it, but it doesn't give you the final outcome. So use the focus to define that backbone. And don't just abandon the backbone because you encounter some edge cases. Edge cases are the reason why we need to have a backbone in the first place. So once you have finalized, okay, how do you want to allocate this, the shared cost, the commitment cost, the tax part, once you have this focus-backed backbone, then always start with one of them. Start with Azure, whatever is your key cloud in your org. Once you have done it for one of them, once you have given the evidence of it, then you extend it to the others. So that, and once you also show this to your stakeholders, right? If it's the same question which you are asking across multiple clouds, you are getting the same answers. And if you have, so it is something like, okay, you start in stages, you prove in stages, and then you also extend it in stages. And that becomes like your backbone pattern. And as we say, come back to the boring part. Let boring be your competitive advantage. Yeah, so very quickly in Avaloq, what are we going to do next since we have this thing sorted now? So there are many more things. So the versions which we use as of now, for the OCI, it is still 1.0, and for AWS and Azure, it is 1.2. So we are trying to push our time so that we get the new versions as fast as possible. But I think as of now, the information which we have in the focus files from an AI point of view, it is on a very surface. You do get the bedrock cost, but it doesn't go very deep into it. And I'm sure, I think today afternoon, we are going to, there would be an announcement about the AI cost, whether it is version 1.5 or maybe in the 1.6. So that is something which we are going to track, and as soon as it is available to us, we are going to incorporate into our reporting as well. So as of now, what we're doing is only the infra cost. We don't integrate the SaaS cost into this focus dashboards which we have built. But yeah, in the 1.3 version of the focus files, we do also have that information. For the shared cost, we do get, as of now, even in the version 1.2, you do have, say, the savings plan cost, which is then amortized to individual resources. But the 1.3 version, it goes into much more detail. Same thing with the contract commitments. It is part of 1.4, and it is something which is used a lot inside Avaloq. So as soon as 1.4 version is available to us, that is also something which we are going to integrate. Yeah, so that's all I had. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I would be happy to take them now.
All right, Q&A, we're going to start with Tremaine. Two things. Holding the magic box does not make your voice louder. Talking to the magic box makes your voice louder. And we're not going to throw it in this room. It's not my first rodeo. If you were known for your throwing accuracy, you wouldn't be at a focus session.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, and thank you for the presentation. Just had a quick question. So you're dealing with focus with a lot of multiple cloud providers and all that update their billing data at different times of the day. It's like Oracle updates theirs like 4 times a day. How did you make sure you made sure that that each data pull was like the finalized bill, and that how did you address that?
Yeah. So The entire extraction of a script, it does after 1 day. So suppose if it's for that 1st June, we don't pull in anything on the 1st June. On the 2nd June, our Python script the automation will work, it will go, and it will check, okay, until the 1st of June, whatever files are there. It might be 4 files, it might be 5 files. As you say, for the OCI, there are multiple files. So it always checks for one older day. It will not check for the same day. And then it will also compare what is there so it is not going and copying everything which is there. It is more like a sync. So it is going there and it is trying to make the destination match with the source. So it will also check, okay, whether a particular file, 1 day old file, it is already there in the destination or not. If it finds it there, it won't copy that file. But if it doesn't find it, it will copy that file. So it is more like it will check for the 1 day old, and it will try to make the destination same as the source, and instead of copying everything.
Thank you, thank you.
I was going to ask you about Redshift, but you explained that. So probably a follow-up question is, why is the landing zone OCI versus AWS if you're moving it into AWS? I'm just curious about that design decision.
Yeah, so OCI is our landing zone. Our 80% of the workloads are on the OCI.
As expected.
Yeah,
Okay,
and the files. So we wanted OCI to be the processing part, also because the amount of files and the size of the files which we have for the OCI is much more. So if we use the OCI as the landing zone, our data transfer costs are also low compared to if we now move entire these huge OCI files every day from OCI to AWS. In terms of the data transfer cost, it is much more cheap. And also now we have a stable egress pattern, because if we know, okay, if OCI is the processing zone in terms of the budget estimate, so all that thing, it helps us. And of course, so this was also one of the discussion points at the start. We had some very good compelling arguments that if we can use AWS itself as the landing zone, then because then it makes much easier for the staging part, which is happening on the AWS itself. But just from the point of view of the data transfer cost, we thought it makes much more sense to use the OCI.
Perfect, thanks.
So how do you handle your data source when the cloud vendors have different versions of Focus?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. And it's not just about different versions. There are also times when they add new columns. So yeah, we don't have to ingest every particular column of the Focus into our warehouse. So we see, okay, what makes sense to Avaloq from a business enterprise point of view. So Focus might tomorrow add 10 new columns. Doesn't mean that we don't have to add all those 10 columns, right? So only the things which makes sense to us, we only pick up and we only extract those columns. So if they add something in the future, and if we feel that, okay, it makes sense to us, we of course add them. And this also we talked about the schema changes, right? So if there is any change in the schema, even if it is past dated, and if we feel, okay, something for the last 1 month, it makes sense for us because the way of the partitioning which we have cases in the past where we have gone back, and for the last, say, 2 months, we have again copied those files and we have added that new column into our warehousing. But just to answer your question, in terms of the partitioning, the date, it is now very easy. If you have to go to the past, and for the past dated files, if you have to make those kind of modifications.
Thank you. Going over to Alessandro.
Well, thank you for the presentation, very interesting. Do you plan, or maybe do you already put some unit metrics in comparison with your Focus specification?
Sorry, again, which metrics?
Do you put some unit metrics just to intersect with your Focus specification?
Yeah, so we don't put the unit metrics in the Focus table which we have, and this is also one of the reasons why we used Redshift, because all the other business volume metrics are already stored in the Redshift. So we use joins, we use different tables. We use the cost table which we have, it gives only the cost information as of now, but we do have other tables which are built by the monitoring teams, where we have the APIs information, the business transaction information. So we use those views, and in the dashboard we give that output. So we like, okay, what is the cost per customer per API call which is happening? What is the cost per for the in terms of the batch process? What was the SLAs and how many CPUs were used to process a particular batch? So those kind of things we do in the dashboards, where we merge the data from our cost table and already the business volumes table which is built by the monitoring.
Nice, thank you.
Great presentation today. In the presentation, you talk a little bit about shared costs. I'm curious if you might share kind of your methodology for how you're allocating some of those shared costs across different cost centers.
Yeah, so it is, I'm going to give an answer which I know it sounds cop-out, but it's not. It's actually the true answer, which is it depends. It depends on the type of the cost which you have. So say, give an example. If there is in AWS, we have a landing zone, which acts like a management, which is then used to build the accounts for different banks. So it is part of a single account. So for that particular account, whatever is the cost, it is equally distributed amongst the different banks which we have. But if you're talking about something which is, so in terms of the savings plan cost, that cost is already amortized. So we don't have to split, say, the savings plan cost, because that is being already applied to the individual resources and the different accounts in the focus file itself. But for certain cases, we do have certain shared cost, mostly from the OKE point of view. What we do, we see the size of the bank. So we have the cases where we have classified different banks into a small size, a medium size, large size, and the XL size. So based on the size of the bank which we have, for these shared costs, we do that distribution. Okay, if it is small, it is like a 10% for a small bank, if it is 30% for a big bank, and 50% for a large bank. So based on the size of the bank, the input which we get it from the architects. So for actually these kind of shared cost, we use the size of the banks. But if it's something which is for the landing zone based on those things, we do the even split.
With that, I think
I see one question.
Well, all right, one more, then that's it.
When you were talking about implementation incrementally, you mentioned tackling the most debated topics first. I was wondering if you could talk more to that. What's the benefit there instead of like taking the low-hanging fruit first?
Can you be a bit louder?
Sorry. Is this good?
Yes, good.
When you were talking about incremental implementation, you talked about tackling the most debated topics first.
Yes.
I was hoping you could talk more about that. What's the benefit there versus tackling the low-hanging fruit first?
Yeah, so when we say incremental thing, what we basically mean is that, okay, do the entire end-to-end thing at least on one cloud. So when we're saying the tax part, yes, the tax part has to be done in the first, but what we're saying, don't merge all the clouds, go everything into one, everything at the start itself. Because once you tackle the most debated definitions, so mostly on the what should be the shared cost, what should be the particular tag key, once it is very difficult inside an org to do everything at once, because it needs a big change, So based on the practicalities which I saw in Avaloq and also in the past orgs, it is much easy to first, do a change for a small part, and you show it to your stakeholders, you gather that trust, and especially in the FinOps one, it is very, we always talk about shift left, but it's also shift up, So it is very easy to get that management trust. So once you are able to do something and show it to the management to different stakeholders, then it becomes very easy, and it is because through then copy the same thing, because in the end then you're just adding a source, because once you have the entire backbone done, when we have the entire pipeline which is set for one cloud, if you want to add for another cloud, you don't have to build anything new. You have to just add one more source to it. So it makes sense to that first finish end-to-end one cloud and then move to the other clouds.
Give it up for Rohit. Excellent job.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. Thanks for watching. Check out the rest of our channel for more FinOps content. Like, subscribe, and leave questions and comments for our speakers. We appreciate your support.